Are the Dallas Cowboys really going to sign AJ Dillon? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we actually got like a hint of free agent news regarding the Dallas Cowboys. Free agent running back AJ Dillon has expressed interest in joining the Dallas Cowboys. And according to James Slater and Mike Fisher, the Cowboys are interested as well. What do you think about that potential pairing?
Well, first of all, it's pretty funny that, the announcement of potential interest is breaking news in Cowboys free agent land. And it is, because there's been so much nothing going on that it's at least something. I think obviously you go back to, his ties to Green Bay and, Mike McCarthy. And I think some of that makes sense. I think, as far as a type, I think it makes sense. The Cowboys needed more of a bruising, kind of between the tackles runner. They kind of had that last year in Rico Dowdle, or at least Dowdle was the kind of version that they had in the backfield. I mean, I think he is more of a kind of more balanced running back, but because he was the biggest running back, it kind of went that way by default, right? Mm-hmm. To me, I think the thing that's the most fascinating about this is, in Jane Slater's report, she had a little video that came out and they talked about, the interest there and the interest in AJ Dillon. And obviously that's the kind of the brunt of the report. But to me, the most fascinating part of the report was the conversation about how they would be looking to pair him with a rookie running back. And to me, that's the point to take away from all this is that, as you and I have been discussing these last few days, weeks, we are of the belief that they aren't likely to going to go with a one running back situation, right? That they weren't going to go for one of these top end guys necessarily to be the kind of bell cow back that, we were thinking the idea of pairing these two of these guys, whether that be two free agents that they signed cheaply or a free agent and a draft pick or multiple draft picks. I think that was kind of more the route that the Cowboys were looking to get, because we felt like that was the best way for them to achieve quality running back play while not having to, kind of go out there and invest all their money into one player while still paying, Ezekiel Elliott, whatever it is, $7 million in dead money. So I think that this makes me excited, even if I'm not necessarily like hugely excited about the prospect of AJ Dillon. I like the plan. Like I like the idea of having a veteran bruiser paired with a rookie running back who provides the juice for the running back room.
I agree. I think the philosophy is right. We talked about this for a while, Landon. Like they just can't afford to spend big money at the running back position. So what's the best way to do that? Go get the between the tackles grinder and then save your draft pick for the guy that has a little bit more juice, because typically those players aren't available in free agency. And when they are, you either have to pay a lot for them or you're getting them after the juice is all gone.
That's right.
Like
Tony
Pollard, right? Like actually, I think Tony Pollard has at least one more year of juice, because
which is why he got paid, right? Which is why he got one of the first deals out the market.
I think the second one, right? DeAndre Swift went first, which again, that's that type of running back.
Yeah.
And then Tony Pollard went second. But as for AJ Dillon, the player, I reached out to our friend Peter from Locked On Packers just to kind of I'm gonna share with you the exact message that I sent to him. How washed is AJ Dillon? And he said, not washed at all. He started slow, but really came on and finished the season well. Then he got hurt at the end of the year. If he has a slasher with him, he's still really solid. Best of all, huge culture guy. You want him in your locker room. So
Yeah.
I know a lot of Cowboy fans, the first thing they did when they heard the AJ Dillon news is they went to Google, typed in AJ Dillon stats, and they saw the 3.5 yards per carry. Like, I get it. Like, he's not Tony Pollard. He's not the guy that's going to be averaging over 5 yards a carry. Well, you know what's really interesting, Landon, is if you go look at on Pro Football Reference, the success rate. So basically,
Yeah.
how often was AJ Dillon successful as a running back? All 4 years, his success rate's over 50%. And a lot of that is because Green Bay used him in short yardage just to pick up first downs, and that crushes your yards per attempt, but actually raises your success rate. Not saying he's a franchise level running back or anything, but he is a capable NFL player that fits the archetype of what Dallas wants. So I at least understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, and success rate is important to have the context here, because success rate measures the ability of, if you get third and if it's 3rd and 3 and you get 3 yards, that's a high success rate, but a low yards per carry, right? Because you're only getting 3 yards carry, but your success rate is high because you did the job. The job was to convert the short yardage run, and I think it's an important context here. And I think that you're hiring AJ Dillon to do a very specific job. Like you're not if you're signing him, you're not signing him to be the bell cow back who's going to get all the carries and he's the feature back of this offense. That's not what this situation is. This is a guy who's part of a group of running backs. And again, this is more of the running back 2 type mold at this point, because the juice, whoever that is going to be the running back 1. So I think, as much as everyone can him and haw or however they feel about AJ Dillon, I'm excited to hear Peter's notes there, because I know Packers fans can be particularly heavy on AJ Dillon's. Frankly, I mean, I've seen a lot of Packers fans over the years, but to have that kind of context is important. And I still very much think he can do the job that the Cowboys would potentially be signing him for. But again, I think the thing that really kind of take away from this whole situation is some clarity about the way that the Cowboys want to attack the running back room. And I think that clarity to me is exciting, because I think that's the appropriate way to handle attacking the running back position in free agency.
We should also mention that I'm going to keep coming back to the analytics, because I really believe that John Park and the Cowboys analytics staff is 100%. Having a big impact on player evaluation. And if you just ignore the regular counting stats and you look at like PFF grade, which again, not the most important thing, but 2021 3rd overall, 2022 10th overall, 2023 22nd overall. Now that's a downward trend that you don't like to see, but it's somebody who is still on average finishes as a top 15 running back over the last 3 years. Maybe the Cowboys feel like, hey, there's not a big difference between him and Josh Jacobs, who just got a $14 million a year deal. And in fact, AJ Dillon, when you look at some of the stable metrics and you look at how they perform as like a pass blocker on 3rd down, AJ Dillon is even better. So if we can get him at, and I'm totally making this up, 1 year, $3 million, that makes a lot more sense to us. Let's go out and get AJ Dillon, and that frees us to draft the best running back that we can get in rounds 2 or 3. If we're not having to draft a guy just to draft a guy. At least it fills some gaps for you.
Yeah, and it gives you kind of, again, the sort of clarity in the kind of running back that you want to get too. You have this guy in-house. Now you're looking more in the mold of a Jalen Wright, Trey Benson, what's the Texas Tech guy? I mean, those are the kind of
Jonathan Brooks from Texas. Yep.
Jonathan Brooks from Texas as well. The kind of more the kind of speed bursty guys, as opposed to the
Bucky Irving,
Braylon Allens or those sort of guys. So and I think again, this is the best way to get the best combination of running backs that you need to kind of form your running back room, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that they're looking at some of the bigger backs, because Zach Moss, not as big as AJ Dillon, but in the same mold. Like he's a 225 pound thumper, right? That's clearly what the Cowboys are looking for here. Let's talk about the rest of their offseason moves and what the strategy is for the Cowboys after not doing anything on the first 2 days of free agency. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's the first thing that you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? Would you read a book? A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can go and do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insights from our MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern or on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, Landon, our next question comes from Jake. He wants to know, it's a very good question. Can you explain what the Cowboys strategy is in free agency? How does this make sense at all?
It's a broad question, but I think essentially it's the same that it mostly has been. I think you talked about it. There's probably going to be some tweaks in about how they're targeting and what position they're targeting based on input from the new analytics team that's kind of finally established itself in the culture in Frisco. But I think for the most part, the Cowboys basically they avoid day one, day two signings outside of, the occasional long snapper or punter. I think, and then they wait and to see how the market kind of gets established itself. They just don't have the interest in signing the type of players that are usually available in day one and day two, because they believe in the kind of caliber of players that need to be signed in day one and day two. They're going to try to acquire via the draft, right? Or through trade or some other methodology. But free agency, especially the first 2 days of free agency, is not good. It's not good efficiency in spending your resources, and frankly, the people that spend in the first 2 days of free agency, as much as we hate sitting here and watching every other team kind of do this kind of stuff, a lot of the stuff that gets done out of desperation. It gets done because there's an enormous hole on a roster that team didn't fill in the previous year. And look, even someone like Howie Roseman, look, they didn't the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson stuff. It's like they weren't willing to pay him the $30 million or whatever it was the previous season, and suddenly they're signing him now. It's like, I think that a lot of things that are done in free agency are done reactively in a negative manner to mistakes that were made in the previous season, right? And we treat it like it's the main methodology in which you should be obtaining your best players. And it's not the NBA. It just still isn't that, And I still think that the best teams, they get their best players by drafting and developing them. They may throw a draft pick and trade for a guy here or there, but very rarely do the best players in the league make it to free agency, get signed to big contracts, and then, perform the way that you're expecting them to. It isn't as common. So the Cowboys are leaning into that process. Now, do they lean too far into it? Maybe they are too avoidant of the first 2 days of free agency to their, detriment. But I think that as far as, on the spectrum of where you can err, it's probably better to err on the side of caution in the first 2 days of free agency than it is to try to just lean in and spend a bunch of money. Because as much as everyone wants to complain about how the bottom three spending teams regress in wins, and I saw this stat out there, I think something said the last 10 years, the bottom 3 teams that have spent money in free agency have regressed 1.4 wins. I don't know that the inverse is better. I don't know that the inverse means that the top 3 teams in free agent spending are gaining a win or so. They may be gaining a bunch of money on their books, but I don't know that they're gaining the wins that associate with all that money. And the Cowboys are betting against that strategy.
I agree with just about everything you said. The only thing that I would add is the further that we get into this offseason, the more it feels like this is a transition year for the Cowboys rather than an all-in year. And I know that Jerry Jones has used all-in, but I look at their actions more than what they say. Usually by this time of the year, the Cowboys will have locked up, several players, and maybe more notably, they'll have restructured several contracts to give them some cap space, right? The Cowboys have the option to restructure Zach Martin's deal, Trayvon Diggs's deal, Terrence Steele's deal, DeMarcus Lawrence's deal, and they haven't touched any of them. Now, maybe they will pull the trigger on one of those deals, pull the lever on one of those deals over the next couple of days. But I'm just starting to think, Landon, that the Cowboys I think they're really hesitant to spend money in 2025 and 2026 cap space on this version of the team, because I think they know that the roster that they have this year will not be as good as the roster they had last year.
No.
And they couldn't even get out of round 1 last year at home with that roster, despite the team being incredibly healthy. You were without 2 of your top 35 guys on the roster, and it still wasn't good enough. So I'm not saying they're throwing in the towel for the 2024 season, but to me, it just feels like, let's let things play out. Let's see how the draft goes, and we'll roll with the guys we have, but we're not throwing more money at this version of the team.
2 things. One, everyone needs to please forget that Jerry Jones said the all-in thing. Just forget it. Like it's clearly not indicative of what they're doing. No. Clearly Jerry tells us whatever anyone wants to hear in these press conferences. Like, and at a certain point, it's like, it's the scorpion and the turtle, right? Like you knew what you were doing when you took the scorpion on your back across the river. It's like Jerry Jones is going to sting you. Like that's just what it is. And I think the other thing too is that this is what I've been, at least, and I think you have been trying to say since they lost that game, is that, as much as anyone wants to say it, like going all in or whatever, the Cowboys are just simply not likely. And I don't want to say it's impossible, because as you and I have talked about many times, like nothing seems impossible in an NFL season, but it just seems extremely 99% unlikely that the Cowboys are going to get back to the situation that they had last season, where they were, basically the number 2 seed with a healthy team playing at home against, a young team, an inexperienced team. Like, you're just not going to get a better scenario than what they did last year, and they still lost last year. So, and on top of the fact that, because of everything else, the way the contracts have come up and everything, they just simply aren't going to have as a good a team as they did last year, just because people have left and all the different things that happened, right? So 2024 is just not going to be likely the same quality of roster as 2023. So the Cowboys have got to find edges in other areas if they want to win this year. Otherwise, it feels like you're right, that they're in years where they would normally sell a little bit of the future in order to kind of win right away. Despite the fact that Jerry Jones, uttered the phrase all in, it seems like it's the opposite. It seems like, if anything, they're very cognizant of the fact that they don't want any more dead money in those future years. They're trying to figure out, they're not touching those contracts unless they absolutely feel like they have to. And that goes back to what you're saying. I read an article with from Katie Drummond at Cowboys Wire that said something like, with all the different flips they can switch, they can produce something like $64 million in cap space in order to get free agent signings. But of course, that requires them to flip these switches and kick this money into the future. And they're just not touching any of that stuff until they have to. And so far, they haven't felt like they've had to.
In hindsight, it really feels like the 2021 and 2023 years were their windows, right? I mean, obviously in 2022, they made it to the divisional round, but in 2021, you had Amari Cooper on the roster. You had CeeDee Lamb only in year 2 of his contract. You had rookie Micah Parsons, where you knew you just didn't have to pay him a bunch of money. You had a healthy Tyron Smith. You had a healthy Zach Martin. And in both times, they were not able to get out of the wild card round despite being at home. Now I just feel like with this roster being a little bit older and with so many of the elite players needing deals between Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb, they feel like, let's let this year play out. Let's save our cap space for those guys. And then maybe 2025 will be like the hard reset. But we'll see. That doesn't mean that the Cowboys aren't going to go out and spend money. They're going to sign some players over the next week or so. But I don't think they're going to be spending a significant amount of money either.
No, I mean, I think it's because of the reason that we just talked about. They, look, we talked about how you can do whatever you want with the salary cap, or I mean, you can to an extent. But when you do stuff, you're still having to pay for it. It's just on the credit card. It's just being pushed down the road. You can, use roster mechanisms to kind of help make that money go away with the increasing cap and rolling over the cap from year to year. But ultimately, like, there's a certain point where if you don't want that dead money eaten up into your cap, and you actually want to compete with the teams like Tennessee and Washington that have all this cap space, then you need to kind of start eliminating your dead money sources, upstream. And the way that you do that is to not keep hitting these switches in these contracts, not keep pushing that money forward, and eventually just, pay the piper and try to start fresh there.
All right, let's discuss the one move that we wish the Cowboys would have made this offseason next. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seats before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. It's so much. It's so easy to use. I use it when I go to all my football games. The all-in prices show your total up front, so you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in matter of seconds with just 2 taps. GameTime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, maybe we'll have a free agent signing to talk about. I don't know. We've been saying this for 3 days in a row. At one point or one day, this has to happen, right? Like, they've got to throw us a bone.
I mean, are you guys not satisfied with Trent Sieg? I'm sorry. I'm just really confused. He's a very good long snapper, guys.
He is. I will say that Landon and I have been starting to watch some prospects that the Cowboys will likely have their eye on in round 1. We'll do some deep dives into those players probably early next week, so keep an eye out for that. But let's finish with this question from Steven. He wants to know, what is the one player or the one signing that you wish the Cowboys would have made 3 days into free agency?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the point here, is that I don't know that there is a ton that I feel like, I really wish the Cowboys had paid, $8 million for Derrick Henry or whatever. Like, I think that there are names that I like, but I just don't know that the contract is necessarily what, here's my issue with the big money first day and second day free agents, right? Especially at the running back position, right? Is that the difference between the skill levels of these players is not appropriately measured in the difference between the price levels of these players, right? Like you can get a 85% of one of the top guys at 50 to 45% of the cost. And so, like, going out and signing a guy at the top end of the running back market, it could probably would have been a little bit more palatable, if you didn't already have a whole bunch of dead money already in your books here. But I also still think that you're not ultimately moving the needle that much by paying almost twice as much money, and I think, especially like with running backs, I tend to think that it's good to probably have multiples and not put all your eggs in one basket. But even outside of that, like just looking at the rest of the landscape, you don't necessarily want to pay those defensive ends what they got paid, because you've already got a guy that you're going to pay a bunch of money. You're already paying DeMarcus Lawrence. So none of those. I would like to have Armstrong back, but I don't think I want Armstrong back at that price, and he deserved the money he got, and I think that's fine. None of the quarterbacks obviously appeal to us. I think the center market seems to be a little bit rich, and I'm kind of preferring to go to the draft at that point, because I think you're probably going to get. I definitely wouldn't have paid what they are going to pay to get Tyler Biotish. So I don't know. I mean, there's just not a ton of these moves that are super appealing to me that, like, I definitely felt like the Cowboys absolutely missed out on. I mean, are you thinking of something?
I've got one, but it's not one that anybody's really going to care about. Just because I happen to know this player well, Jermaine Illuminor, who the Giants signed to a 2-year, $14 million deal. He started games at right tackle, left tackle, and right guard for the Raiders, and has been a really good player. Now, he's not like he shouldn't be your first or your second best offensive lineman, but if he's your third best or your fourth best, you're doing really well. So like if the Cowboys aren't going to bring back Tyron Smith, he's somebody that I would have liked to see them grab, because, okay, if you want to kick out Tyler Smith, the left tackle, he can play left guard. If you want to keep him at left tackle and basically be your swing guy, you can keep Tyler Smith at left guard. You can do that as well. I just thought the Giants got a really good bargain on him at $7 million. I mean, that's like swing tackle money, and he's been a top 15 right tackle in the NFL for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think that's the only one. Other than that, no. I mean, did you want to pay $13-14 million a year for Patrick Queen?
No.
You want to pay for what the Texans give Danielle Hunter? Was it $27 million a year?
No. I like even the Josie Jewell deal, like it felt a little rich for me. And again, like the point of Josie Jewell is that you were getting a bargain from the guy, right? Like, so yeah, I feel like that's the thing here that I think is a little frustrating, is that I think folks are getting upset because they're seeing names that have been floated about, as suggestions for Cowboys free agent signings, but they've been suggested. Some of these names have been suggested because they were supposed to be bargains, not because you've just got to have Josie Jewell on your team. It's like you felt like you were going to get a good bargain at that price. But if they signed like just outrageous contracts, it's not like I feel like I missed out on that player at the price that he was signed on. So yeah, to me, it's not even necessarily about the players that are signed in the first 2 days. It's the deals that are signed in the first 2 days. Well, like they're just outrageous usually.
The only other one that I liked was Zach Moss at 2 years, $8 million. And I think it's really like 2 years, $7 million. But I even laugh at that one a little bit, because Zach Moss got traded before the 2023 season for a conditional 6th-round pick.
And had a good season.
That's, I mean, you could go and make that move for there's going to be a bunch of running backs available. Maybe Khalil Herbert for the Bears, who has 1 year left on his deal. Could the Cowboys flip a conditional 6th-round pick for Khalil Herbert, who I think is just the same player as Zach Moss? Sure. So that's why I understand why everybody's freaking out that the Cowboys haven't made a move. But it's not like there's been 12 to 15 moves out there that I wish the Cowboys would have made. I think for the most part, the first 2 or 3 days of free agency, you have to overpay for players. And yes, it makes your team better, but you're still overpaying.
I also think that folks need to realize that there is a price point per player, right? Like I saw a lot of people complaining about the fact that the Cowboys weren't willing to pay a running back, $4 million or whatever he got, but that wasn't about the Cowboys not being willing to pay any running back $4 million. It's just about that's what the price for Moss, right? They didn't think Moss was worth more than that. So I think that the Cowboys are looking to get a running back that will produce at a level that's appropriate to what they're paying them. And I mean, I hate to say this, guys, but I don't think that that's outrageous. I don't think that that's, like a terrible thing necessarily.
All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.